You know, there is this very specific, like universally painful experience that we don't really have a good word for in everyday language.
Oh, absolutely. It's a tough one to describe.
Right. So picture this for a second. You are standing fully in your power. You are bringing your absolute best self to the table.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a relationship where you are finally being completely vulnerable, or a creative project you've poured your soul into.
Or even just an idea that you're pitching in a meeting.
Exactly. You're giving it your absolute all, completely unapologetic about your brilliance in that moment. And what happens? You look around and you get absolutely nothing but silence in return.
Just crickets.
People look away, they change the subject, they leave you on read. It's just agonizing.
It is a profound kind of isolation. Because it's not the pain of failing or, the pain of not trying hard enough.
Right.
It's the unique sting of having shown up completely, only to watch the room practically empty out.
So today, we are taking your sources, specifically a phenomenal essay titled, "Why Are They Avoiding Me?" on the sacred wound of the unanswered presence.
Such a powerful title.
It really is. And we're looking at that alongside some psychological research on nervous system regulation that we've woven in. And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the mechanics of this profound spiritual crisis. We want to completely redefine what it means when the world seems to look away from your brightest, most authentic self.
Which is a huge paradigm shift for a lot of people.
Yeah, so, okay, let's unpack this, because the author doesn't frame this as just some petty social complaint about not getting enough attention.
Right, it's not about that at all.
They frame it as a massive collision between the absolute fullness of a person's presence and the world's utter unwillingness to meet it.
That framing is crucial to everything we're going to talk about. I mean, this isn't about ego validation.
Right.
The author actually describes this specific feeling of being avoided when you are at your absolute best as the moment the goddess forgets, just for a moment, that she is the goddess.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a momentary lapse in remembering your own inherent sovereignty, brought on by the shock of a quiet room. We expect brightness to attract, like moths to a flame.
Sure, that's what we're taught.
But the text proposes a completely different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a flame doesn't attract, it intimidates.
Intimidates, yeah.
And the person shining forgets their own light because they are so intensely focused on the fact that no one is gathering around it.
That brings up a dynamic I think a lot of us have faced. Sometimes I notice that, like, when I bring a really disruptive idea to a group, something that challenges the status quo, the room just goes completely cold.
Yeah.
It feels like my ideas just scare people off. And the essay uses mythology to explain this, which I found fascinating because it proves human beings have been grappling with the weight of an unanswered presence for millennia.
The mythological lens is incredibly useful here. What's fascinating here is how the disruptive idea and scaring people off, the author points to Oya from the Yoruba tradition.
Oh, right. The goddess of storms.
Exactly. Goddess of storms, of wind, of massive transformation, and the threshold of change. When Oya shows up, things are going to be uprooted.
Yeah, you can't ignore a storm.
But the text makes a vital observation. People don't avoid Oya because she is wrong about what needs to change. They avoid her because she is correct and they just aren't ready to move.
They just don't want to deal with it.
Right. They aren't ready for the storm that comes with acknowledging her truth.
So they avoid the storm to protect their own comfort.
Exactly.
But what if it's not about disruption or change? What about when it's just, I don't know, a completely different level of depth? Like you're at a dinner party holding a conversation that no one else is equipped for.
That maps perfectly onto another figure the author brings in, Saraswati from Hindu mythology.
She's the goddess of knowledge, right?
Yes. Knowledge, music, wisdom. The image the author paints is of Saraswati sitting apart from the feast, holding her veena, her musical instrument. She is the one who knows things that no one else in the room is speaking about.
So she's isolated by her own depth.
Precisely. The insight here is that she isn't sitting apart because she is irrelevant. She is apart because her wisdom precedes the room it's meant for.
Oh, that's beautiful.
She is holding a frequency that the rest of the party hasn't caught up to yet.
And then there are those moments where it's not intellect, but raw emotional intensity. When you show up with a vulnerability or a grief that is just massive and people practically run the other way.
Which brings us to Demeter, the Greek goddess of the harvest, and the story of her losing her daughter, Persephone, to the underworld.
Right, and she just withdraws completely.
And when she withdraws in her grief, the earth goes barren. The author makes a brilliant distinction here. Demeter's withdrawal is not a sign of weakness. Her grief is actually her power, unwitnessed and therefore turned inward.
So it's power acting on herself.
Yes, the world doesn't avoid to meet her in that state because she is too little. The world cannot bear her because she is too much.
Her pain is too raw.
The scale of her emotion is simply too vast for the mortals around her to comprehend, so they shrink away. Synthesizing these three archetypes offers a massive reframe. Whether you are carrying disruption, deep wisdom, or vast emotion, you are not avoided because you are lacking something.
You're avoided because you are arriving.
Exactly. You are arriving.
I love the idea of arriving,
Yeah.
but I have to push back a little bit, or at least look at the reality of how this feels in the body.
Sure, it's not easy.
Because this mythic framework is beautiful, but in the moment, silence feels like a very clear, very harsh verdict on your worth. It feels like total rejection. So how do we move from this poetic understanding to, like, a mechanical one?
That is the pivotal transition in the source material. We operate from a framework where distance means diminishment, where silence is a verdict.
Right.
But the author argues that avoidance is not a verdict. Avoidance is data. It is information.
Wait, so if it's just information, then the silence in the room isn't a judgment on my worth?
Not at all.
It's actually just raw data about their emotional bandwidth. It's less like they are actively rejecting you and more like you're plugging a 220-volt appliance into a 110-volt outlet.
That's a great way to look at it.
You aren't a bad appliance, but if you don't unplug, you're going to blow their psychological fuses.
That analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. Let's look at the biology behind that blown fuse. When someone is radiating absolute authenticity, when they're operating at that 220-volt level, it requires a high degree of emotional regulation for others to stay in the room with them.
Because it's intense.
Very intense. The brain's amygdala is constantly scanning the environment for threats. If the people around you haven't done the internal work to hold that level of intensity, they lack what psychologists call vagal tone.
Vagal tone.
Yeah, which is the ability of the nervous system to self-regulate and calm down.
So their bodies are literally misinterpreting the situation.
Precisely. Because your brightness disrupts their homeostasis, their nervous system reads your unbridled presence as an apex predator.
Wow, an apex predator just for being authentic?
Yes. It triggers a fight, flight, or freeze response. Usually in modern social settings, that looks like slight. They change the subject or freeze. They give you complete silence.
That makes so much sense.
People sidestep what their nervous systems have not yet learned to metabolize. Your arrival forces a mirror up to their stagnation, their suppressed desires, or their complacency. Rather than look in that mirror and regulate their own nervous system, they just look away from you.
That completely changes the internal monologue. Instead of sitting there in the boardroom asking, what is wrong with me? Why am I unlikable? This paradigm shift asks us to observe the data of their capacity.
Exactly.
We should be asking, what is my presence asking of them that they aren't ready to give?
It shifts the locus of control entirely. It turns avoidance from a wound inflicted upon you into a reflection of their current biological and psychological limitations.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because you could easily take that realization and turn it into sheer arrogance.
Oh, very easily.
You could say, well, my nervous system is highly evolved and theirs isn't, so I don't need anyone. But the author doesn't do that. They don't pretend we don't need people.
No, they don't.
The text explicitly states that even with this intellectual reframe, the ache of carrying a fullness with nowhere to land is genuinely painful, and it calls this pain the sacred wound.
That is one of the most compassionate parts of the source material.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing why a room goes quiet doesn't make the quiet any less deafening.
Yeah.
The author grounds this need for connection in what they call the fundamental relational architecture of consciousness.
This sounds a lot like developmental psychology, like how infants literally learn that they exist because their caregivers react to their expressions. It's psychological mirroring.
Exactly.
We are wired to need a reflection to understand our own boundaries.
That is the exact mechanism. Consciousness does not develop in a vacuum. A child smiles, the parent smiles back, and the child's brain registers, I am here and I have an impact. We never outgrow that biological imperative to be witnessed. The desire to be received, to be met, to be known and reflected back, that is not your ego being needy. That is the very nature of existence.
The text even scales that concept up to the universe itself, right?
It does. The author paints this incredible image of the cosmos itself expanding outward, as if reaching. The universe is constantly expanding, searching for an edge, interacting with dark matter, and forming galaxies.
Everything wants to connect.
Everything that exists wants to interact.
Mm.
So when you reach out with your full presence and find empty space, that grief you feel is echoing a fundamental cosmic longing.
That's wild.
You shouldn't dismiss the griefs. You shouldn't shame the question of why are they avoiding me. You have to let it be the sacred wound that it is.
It takes the shame right out of the sting of rejection. It is literally how we are built. But that brings up a really practical dilemma.
Okay, what's that?
Knowing that the pain is valid and knowing that their avoidance is just a reflection of their nervous system's capacity, well, what is the action plan? What does sitting on a throne actually look like in the real world? Say, a corporate boardroom when your pitch is ignored.
The author details what happens when a person asks the question with genuine curiosity rather than collapse. They introduce the concept of the spiral.
The spiral?
Yeah. It is okay to feel the indignation and the hurt. You can ask the question with your whole body, but it must be done as a sovereign's demand for clarity, not a victim's plea. The realization that follows this demand is the throne.
I see.
The goddess remembers that her throne does not require an audience to be a throne.
Practically speaking, sitting on your throne in that boardroom means you don't rush to fill the silence. You don't immediately start apologizing or self-deprecating to make the room comfortable. You deliver your pitch, you let the silence hang, and you observe their discomfort without absorbing it as your own failure.
That is a perfect real-world application. Your knowing does not require their agreement to be knowledge.
Which brings up the biggest warning in the entire essay. The temptation to do the exact opposite of holding that silence. The temptation to, as the author puts it, file down the edges of yourself.
It's so common.
If we go back to that electrical analogy, it's like rewiring your own circuitry to run on a lower voltage just so you don't overwhelm a weak grid.
Exactly.
You dial your authenticity down just to make yourself palatable to people who aren't ready for daylight.
The essay calls this the most dangerous choice available. Not because staying visible guarantees that people will suddenly start receiving you. It doesn't.
Right.
The danger is deeply internal. If you contract in response to someone else's avoidance, you are actively teaching your own nervous system that your fullness is a threat.
You're creating a physiological feedback loop of smallness.
Yes. You train your body to associate your brightest, most authentic self with danger and rejection. Over time, that belief solidifies into architecture. It becomes the literal shape you live in.
Oh, wow.
Your posture rounds forward. The cadence of your voice loses its resonance. Your creative output shrinks. The author states plainly that the goddess who asks, "Why are they avoiding me?" and then makes herself smaller, the goddess slowly forgets what she was. She loses her own myth.
That is heartbreaking.
But the one who feels the grief fully and then expands back into her complete shape regardless of the room's reaction, that goddess becomes the myth.
So what does this all mean? If we refuse to lower our voltage and we hold that silence in the boardroom without apologizing, we are still left with an empty room.
On the surface, yes.
So the essay provides a completely different way to look at that timeline, doesn't it? If we stand tall and they are still avoiding us, what is actually happening?
The author provides a final, resounding answer to the core question. The reason they are avoiding you is simple. You are early.
You are early.
The text offers beautiful metaphors for this. You arrived before the room was ready. You named the feeling before the language caught up. And most powerfully, you built the cathedral before the city existed.
You built the cathedral before the city existed? That completely changes the landscape of how you view your own work.
It really does.
You aren't stranded in a wasteland. You've just laid the foundation for a city that hasn't grown up around you yet. Because presence at that magnitude requires something of the people who encounter it. It requires them to either be willing to grow or to be willing to be seen not growing.
And being seen not growing is a highly uncomfortable choice for most people.
Yeah.
You carry something they recognize in themselves, but haven't given themselves permission to embody yet. This leads to the ultimate reframe of the crowd that the essay ends on.
What's that?
What looks like avoidance from your throne might just be a sacred lag between transmission and reception.
A sacred lag, like a satellite delay in broadcasting. You sent the signal and it's traveling through space and it just hasn't hit their receivers yet.
And we have to remember how light travels. The text points out a vital, hopeful detail. Some of the people you think are avoiding you aren't avoiding you at all. They are in the shadows of your periphery. They are watching you. And they are using the light you're casting to build up the courage to walk toward you. They are actively doing the nervous system regulation required to become exactly the kind of person who can receive what you're offering.
They are clearing space. They just need a minute to catch up to the frequency.
Exactly.
The truth has a way of landing eventually. The gap will close. So to bring this all together for you listening, if you are bringing your absolute all, if you're operating at peak voltage and the room goes suddenly painfully quiet, remember that your presence does not require reception to be real. You are not a verdict waiting for a jury. You are a transmission. You are Demeter in her power, Saraswati with her wisdom, Oya at the threshold. Don't reach for that rewiring kit. Don't file down your edges while you wait for the world to catch up to the cathedral you just built.
And as we wrap up, I want to offer one final thought that builds on this entire framework.
Go for it.
We spent this deep dive talking about what to do when you are the one being avoided because you're early or shining too brightly. But let's flip the mirror for just a second. Think about your own life, your own circles, your own biological reactions. What if we are the ones avoiding someone else's brightness?
Oh, wow.
Whose cathedral are you currently walking past or actively ignoring simply because your own nervous system isn't quite ready to enter? Who is holding up a mirror to your own unlived potential and forcing you to look away?
That is a question to sit with. And on that note, we want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Wherever you are, keep your edges sharp, keep your volume up, and keep shining, even when the room goes quiet. We'll catch you next time.